Today we're going to discuss the story of Corporal Wotjek. Now this is actually spelt, if you're using a standard English phonetic alphabet, Whiskey, Oscar, Juliet, Tango, Echo, Kilo. However, it is a Polish name and it is pronounced Wojtek. Now today's story is going to be slightly different as Corporal Wotjek is not a human soldier. However, I believe that Corporal Wotjek meets the concept of a Kevin as his story is both interesting and at times amusing. So in some ways he is a Kevin. Please note that quite a lot of names and words in this podcast are going to be Polish, and as someone who does not speak Polish, I'm going to do my best to pronounce these names. However, I can promise you that I'm going to butcher them. Please take this as an apology in advance. Corporal Wotjek was a Syrian brown bear who fought in the Second World War as a corporal in the 22nd Transport Company, Artillery Division of the Polish Second Corps. The story today starts off in the spring of 1942 with a newly formed Anders army leaving the Soviet Union heading for Iran. They were accompanied by thousands of Polish civilians who had been deported to the Soviet Union following the 1939 Soviet invasion of eastern Poland. At a railway station in Hamadan, Iraq, on the 8th of April 1942, they encountered a young Iranian boy who had found a bear cub whose mother had been shot by hunters. It is said that at the time the young bear cub was being kept in a sack by the shepherd boy who had found him. One of the civilian refugees in their midst, 18-year-old Irina Boykowicz, the great niece of General Boleslaw Wieniawa Lugzowski, was very taken with the cub. She prompted Lieutenant Anatol Tarnowiecki to buy the young bear, which spent the next 3 months in a Polish refugee camp established near Tehran, principally under Irina's care. And I am very, very sorry, I have completely butchered those names, so I am definitely sorry. Later that year, in August, as the war developed, the situation changed. Wotjek was eventually donated to the 2nd Transport Company, which would later go on to become the 22nd Transport Company, Artillery Division, Polish Second Corps. The name Wotjek is a diminutive of a Polish name, Wojciech, which means happy warrior. When, at the time, Private Wotjek was taken on by the soldiers, he had difficulty eating and swallowing, and so they would feed him condensed milk, which they poured into his mouth from an old vodka bottle. Later on, they moved to feeding him fruit, honey, marmalade, and syrup. And when he did good things, they often rewarded him by feeding him beer. He was very fond of drinking coffee in the morning with the rest of the troops. So, this bear was basically a soldier. You either feed him beer or feed him coffee and he'll be happy. It has also been reported that many times during Corporal Wotjek's early career, he would often be found in the mess tent, stealing whatever food he could scavenge. And like any soldier, he was a fan of punching darts, though his habit would often be that he would eat the cigarettes rather than smoke them. Now, despite being a bear and being readily able to kill any of his companions, Corporal Wotjek would often wrestle with his comrades, and he was taught to salute when greeted. One can only imagine the confusion of the enemy snipers when they would look down upon the camp and not only see an officer walking around, but see the officer walking past a grown bear and then have the bear salute them. It would have appeared as something out of a movie or a cartoon. Now, throughout the conflict, Wotjek moved with the soldiers through many campaigns, including Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and by the time he fought at the Battle of Monte Cassino, he had grown to weigh in at 90 kilos, or around 200 pounds. In Palestine, Wotjek became a hero one night by capturing a thief who broke into an ammunition compound where the bear was sleeping. The man was shocked to find himself confronted by the animal, and the commotion that ensued resulted in his arrest. Wotjek was quite satisfied with the reward of a bottle of beer. Now, while mascots were not officially approved in this region of war by any of these militaries, Corporal Wotjek also made friends with other mascots of other companies, including Kasha the monkey and Kirkuk the dog. Wotjek was quite distressed when Kasha the monkey died of a broken heart when her baby did not survive, and then later on when Kirkuk the dog would be stung by a scorpion and die. It was around this time it is reported that Wotjek himself was also stung on the nose by a scorpion. The men of his company would rush him to a medical tent, and they insisted that he would be admitted. They then stayed by his side in the medical tent for many days until he recovered from the sting. Now, an interesting point to note, the difference in regulations between the militaries meant that until his fighting in Egypt, Wojtek was not actually considered to be a regular soldier within the military. He was, however, considered unofficially as a mascot. Now, given there was no such thing as an official mascot in the Polish military. After fighting in the Egypt campaign, the Polish 2nd Corps was reassigned to fight alongside the British 8th Army in the invasion of Italy, and therefore British regulations prevented any form of pet or mascot being brought onto British ships. To get around this, the Polish commander thereby conscripted Corporal Wotjek into the army as a private and assigned him a service number. He was issued a paybook and sleeping equipment, and the paperwork was completed to have a uniform issued. However, there is no record of Wojtek ever being actually issued a uniform. Understandably, one would have needed to be custom made. Due to the time he spent with the Polish soldiers in these many campaigns, it was very quickly apparent that Wojtek was an incredibly skilled bear and had been somewhat tamed and somewhat trained. Along with saluting, he was often seen marching around the camp with the men in step and would stand to every morning for parade roll calls next to his handlers Heinrich Zakowicz and Dimitra Zlawugo. I butchered those completely. It was during the Battle of Monte Cassino that Wojtek assisted in the conflict by carrying crates of artillery shells from the trucks up to the front line where they could be fired. The soldiers would later go on to state that Wojtek started mimicking them one day when they did it, and they rewarded him with food, so he soon learned that this was something that if he did it, he would get food. As a result of his immense strength and size, Wojtek was able to easily replace 4 men on the gun line due to not so much the weight of the ammunition boxes, but their physical size. Now, there was a lot of reports that this did not occur until many British soldiers who were at the battle also backed up that they saw a bear during the battle carrying ammunition boxes. After the Battle of Monte Cassino, he was rewarded for his hard work by being promoted to the rank of corporal, and the company was also then granted the bear as a mascot and allowed to adopt the depiction of a bear carrying an artillery shell as their official emblem, an emblem which they still carry to this day. In 1945, upon the completion of the Second World War, Corporal Wotjek was transported to Berwickshire, Scotland, with the rest of the 22nd Company, and they were stationed at Winfield Airfield on Sunwick Farm near the village of Hutton on the Scottish borders. As a result of there being a large bear with an exceptional military record in the local area, it is no surprise that Corporal Wotjek soon became a hit with many villagers in the local town. And as a result of his immense popularity, the Polish-Scottish Association made him an honorary member, and following demobilisation, he was given residence at the Edinburgh Zoo, where he spent the rest of his life. Many of the visitors to Corporal Wotjek after his service would often throw him treats in the zoo, including cigarettes, which he would promptly eat, as he was famous for doing in the army. He would often recognise soldiers that he had served with when they would come and visit him, and he would respond to them when they spoke to him in Polish, leading to the zookeepers needing to learn Polish in order to interact with Wojtek. Corporal Wotjek passed away in December of 1963 at the age of 21, weighing in at nearly 500 kilograms and having grown to 1.8 metres tall. In a time when Polish soldiers had lost their country to the Nazis and then later to the Communists, Wojtek was a symbol which the soldiers were proud of, themselves knowing that they would soon return to a free homeland, and it would be partially due to the help of Wojtek. He became part of the history of the Polish armed forces in the Second World War, and his legacy will continue to endure. The many memorials to the soldier bear include a plaque in the Imperial War Museum in London, a sculpture by David Harding in the Sikorsky Museum in London, and a wooden sculpture in Wheelsby Woods in Grimsby. In 2013, the Krakow City Council gave permission for the erection of a statue of Wojtek in the city's Jordan Park. It was unveiled on the 18th of May 2014 on the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Monte Cassino. Also in 2013, the City of Edinburgh Council approved the erection of a bronze statue of Wojtek by Alan Beatty Harriott to stand in the city's West Princes Street Gardens. In September 2018, a wooden statue of Wojtek was unveiled in the Poznan Zoo, funded by Krystyna Wojciechowicz, the author of a Polish book about Wojtek. In May 2019, a marble statue of Wojtek was unveiled in Casino in Italy, and in 2017, a street in Poznan, Poland was named after Wojtek. The street, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce the Polish name, but in English is called Corporal Wotjek Street, and it leads to the zoo. Thank you very much for listening today. If you want to get your own stories onto the podcast, please check out the email address in the podcast description. If you want to, give some feedback, please give the comments, preferably on Podbean, but I believe they do get put on other podcast apps. I just need to find out where they are put. Or you can just submit your feedback, again, with your stories, straight to the storiesaboutkevinpodcast at gmail.com email address, and I will read them as well. We are soon going to look into getting onto Zoom and doing some interviews with soldiers. So if you want to be shortlisted for that, please, again, send us an email. And thank you very much for listening today.